Hi, folks. Good afternoon. It's officially afternoon. It's officially noon. So I have the pleasure of introducing two amazing fellows in our program here. And hold your applause. We're going to get to the second person, to Christie Aldrich Barrera. Dr. Aldrich graduated from medical school at the University of Texas Health Science Center at San Antonio in 2019. She then completed psychiatry residency at Baylor College of Medicine in Houston, Texas. She is currently in the final year of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry Fellowship here. Outside of work, she enjoys spending time with her husband, daughter, and two dogs. What kind of dogs do you have to say?
We have a Shiba and a Black Lab mix.
Oh, fun. Oh, look, I got a little cow sticker on my. So cute. Is this from your laptop?
No, it was on the podium.
Oh, I love it. We have animals. I'm gonna keep it.
Probably because they have DBT in this room. And they have stickers.
Oh, they have stickers. That's great. So lovely to be in community with two of our presenters here and with the rest of you. I'm going to be quiet and we can get some learning done today.
Right. So I'm Christie. I think most people here know me, but good to see everybody. So today what I'll be talking about is helping families help themselves. I also have no relevant disclosures. Our learning objectives for today are to be able to discuss the framework for evaluating parenting books, defining the framework for 4 different books, so the topics in parenting, and considering how to use this framework for this. And before we get started, I was hoping you all can help me with my college project, but it's very short for me. I'll give them time to do most phones going down with the going so. Thank you for allowing me to cover this. So why am I talking about this? It's impossible for us to read every parenting book available. If you search for parenting books, there are thousands. They're very length, long, shorter, but there's no way you can read all of them. And the families that we see are going to be looking for parenting books, are going to be looking for help, because nobody hands you a manual of exactly how to care for your child. We also know, as kind of related, that parenting books are a primary source of knowledge for many parents. One study, 71% of parents report a parenting book is a base of knowledge. Again, we can't screen all of them, we can't read all of them, we can't know everything about every single one. We say these ones are fantastic, these ones are awful. We can know some of them, but we can't know all. We want to help parents be able to critically think about the many parenting books available. The ones to read.
There's a request to project your voice. Thank you.
So we want to be able to help parents think critically about the books that they're reading, especially considering that we can't read all of them. And no matter how long the visit, we can't cover everything either. I think that's one of the biggest challenges that I've faced professionally, is that there's so many things I would love to cover in every visit, but you just can't get to everything. And you're like, oh, if I could put a little more time, maybe I could do that. But you can't, because there's never going to be enough time to cover absolutely everything you want to. And then books are really helpful because they're information that parents can pretty easily and readily access. They can also refer back to it when needed. They can't have you in your pocket all the time for the most part, unless you're in the DBT program. But they can have a parenting book that they can reference back to multiple times. There's also evidence that self-help interventions like parenting books are effective. In one study that was focused on a more specific program, but still with that idea, we just gave these parents resources. There was a group where it was just self-help only, so just the resource itself. There was one group where it was the resource plus a therapist they could talk to for a little tiny bit. I think it was like 20 minutes discussion for interventions. Then one group where there was nothing, they're just on the wait list and waiting and see what happened. And all of the self-help group and the minimal intervention group both showed improvements, and they both showed sustained improvements over time in the child's behavior. So that's why we're talking about this today. So the overall framework that I kind of conceptualized is getting an idea of what is this book about? What is it supposed to help you with? Is it related to the age of your child? Does it come in a format that's helpful for the parent that you're seeing? And what are the strengths and what are the weaknesses? So these are just kind of very general things, and then are specific questions that come up with for talking about these books with parents. So for overview, obviously, does this book feel applicable for your child's age is a really good start. If it's a book that's made for toddlers and you're talking to parents of teenagers, probably not going to be quite as useful for them. And then what does this book focus on? So just getting an idea of like overall, like what does this book feel like it's supposed to be helpful with? Overall, how is it helpful for you? Languages and format, what format works best for you and does it come in that format? And that's printed books, ebooks, audiobooks, there's lots of different ways to access books in the world. And then getting an idea of is their preferred format easy to access again and reread again. One of the great things about audiobooks is it makes books more accessible for people who don't necessarily like to read as much. One of the hard things is it's a lot harder to pick up an audiobook and go back to the exact point that you were looking for to highlight parts that you were curious about. So pros and cons to every format. And then something else to think about too for easy access. In general, books don't tend to be too terribly expensive, but at the same time, it can be something that's challenging for parents to afford when there's already so many other things to focus on too. So you can talk to parents about, is this a book that's available from your local library, that's available on Libby, which is a library ebook app that's really helpful. And again, there's pros and cons to that. If it's a library book, you can't necessarily mark in it, write in it, refer back to it quite as easily, but it can still be helpful. And you can check it out again if you need it again. And then does it come in your preferred language? There's lots of books out there that have lots and lots and lots of language editions available. There's also a fair number of books that only come in one or two. And so finding out, does this come in a language that works for that family? And also kind of thinking about, does it come in a language that works somewhat for that family, but not necessarily the best? If you have a family that speaks some English, they can access some of these books, but it would be really better if it came in a language that was more tailored to them. Those are the first few questions. And then strengths, what did parents like about the book? Did they strategies that were offered help increase the connection relationship with the child? Any skills or strategies that felt particularly helpful for the child or family? I'm curious for anybody who asked about parenting books with their patients, anything we've asked about these would be a really helpful question.
Does the book have personal stories?
Yeah, that's a really good one. Did they feel relatable?
Can you repeat that for folks who are online?
Yeah. So Dr. Anderson brought up a great question. You can ask them, does the book include personal stories? All right. And then critiques, is there anything about this book that made you feel uncomfortable? Is there anything you tried that made things worse? Are there any specific skills or strategies that wouldn't work for your family? And that's a question that's always interesting because there's some things that definitely wouldn't work and there's others where like the family says it wouldn't work and you're like, but it actually could be helpful if you tried it a few times. Does it go along with your overall parenting approach? And if not, how would it feel to try something new? So helping parents to think critically. I think it's one of the hard things with books is that it feels like that should be an expert who's writing it, but it isn't necessarily always an expert who's writing it. So helping them to have the skills to say, okay, what about this book is not as useful for me? What about this book is not as helpful? Any questions you guys have used to help parents think critically about the resources they're looking at?
What year was it written?
Yeah, what year was it written is a really good question. If it's way, way, way back in time, it might be useful.
Does it list any peer-reviewed journals?
Yeah. Yeah. Does it list any peer-reviewed journals? And a lot of the books that I look at, they'll have some references, but a lot of the time the references are to things like news articles, which are hit or miss for how much of a good source that is.
You're making me think about how often a parent will like self-disclose to me, I just read this book, and all of the time that happens because they're kind of like raving about it. It's made an impact, right? I don't know if I've ever had a parent say, I read this terrible book about parenting. It's like, that's where I'll get it from, is this was impactful in some way. And so maybe you'll talk about this also, but the idea of now it's with them and they can refer to it like when they are in distress, and there's two things that it can function for. It can be like a coping mechanism when they're overwhelmed, and then it can provide knowledge.
I'll find out. So the next thing I wanted to do was just use this framework to go through 4 books that I've read that I personally either liked or disliked, or mostly some combination of both. I don't think I've read any books yet that I'm like, this is absolutely not what I will ever refer to in my life. And then also some books that focus more on a specific topic as opposed to being a general care. So trying to see how can we use this and apply this to look at books, no matter what it is that they're talking about, as long as they have that. The first one is how to talk so kids will listen and listen so kids will talk. And I forgot one part of my slide here, but that's okay. This is absolutely one of my favorite parenting books of all time. I love it. I've read it multiple times. I think it's really, really helpful. The target age for this book is pretty much all. It's a series of books. There's how to talk so little kids will listen, there's how to talk so kids will listen, there's also how to talk so teens will listen. So no matter the age of your child, this book can be relevant for you. This how to talk so kids will listen is a bit more targeted towards kind of like the late childhood, early preteen. But it's applicable for pretty much kids of all ages at the same time. Their overall approach, I think the reason I forgot about this part is because it's really hard to define. In general, I think this book does a really excellent job of increasing communication skills between parents and kids, and increasing empathy in the family by increasing those communication skills. Languages and formats, this book has been around for a while, so it comes really delightful. There's a printed book, there's audiobooks, there's ebooks. It's in English, Spanish, Chinese. The reason I put unspecified is when I looked at the Chinese edition, I couldn't tell if it was Cantonese or Mandarin or what I'm sure. Arabic, Polish, Russian, Lithuanian, many languages. In the DPH clinic that I'm at, I have a lot of families who speak Spanish, and so I just recommended this for the other day in the Spanish edition. I was like, oh, I'm so glad that this resource exists for the family. Hopefully they use it. Strengths, there's comments at the end of every chapter that are easy to reference, relates to skills really well. There's worksheets that are scattered throughout, so it gives parents a way to kind of not just read the skills, but also like think about how they could use them in their own lives. There's a really strong focus on building attachment, like empathy and problem solving, and not just communicating with your child, but also how can you use that communication with your It was really hard to think of critiques. It was really hard to think of downsides. I think in a lot of ways this can be very different from the ways a lot of parents parent, and so it can just be a bit hard to absorb. It takes time. It's also a good one to be able to talk about with families so they can help to work on this skills. More strength. There's letters at the end of the book, or there's a really big section that's just letters from readers over time. I think that's a really nice section for giving hope and really supports strategies that are used to be helpful. And there's also a section that's reflections from Joanna Faber, who's Adele Faber's daughter, one of the authors, on how her mom's parenting style was similar to this and how it felt like it was helpful for her, and also how she's tried to use these skills with her own kids and realized, oh, this is really, 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 really hard, no matter how much this is.
Christie, I hate to interrupt you, and folks are really having a hard time hearing you, and they really want to hear you. They're like, please say it louder and slower, just so folks are tracking better. We're able to track, but there's an extra filter. Yeah. There is. That's very smart, though.
Oh, it's the Wi-Fi here. I've been doing this. Hold on, we'll connect to my phone.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Yeah, I know folks really want to learn about this, so sorry to interrupt you. And
No worries. One of my ongoing challenges is talking too fast and talking more loudly.
Sorry, everyone. I have been at all of my visits.
to hear.
All right, so the next book I wanted to talk about is focusing more on books that is more critique, where you have some skills that are helpful, but you're also like, there's some weird things about this one. And that is like as a parent, this is a book that I read a little while ago and I just enjoyed it, but I was also like, there's some weird stuff here. So a good one to kind of show critiques of the book. The target age for this one is more toddlers and young children. And the overall approach is kind of focusing on specific skills to build relationships and encourage helpfulness, which I think is helpful. There's just we'll get to the critiques. This book comes in a fair number of forms: printed book, audiobook, ebook, and a fair number of languages: English, Spanish, French, Bulgarian, and more. It's actually difficult to figure out just how many language editions books come in because there's no one single list. You just look up for all the editions for this. The strength in this book, it encourages seeing, appreciating, and encouraging innate mindfulness and helpfulness in kids, which I think is really helpful because a lot of our parents who have challenges with their kids, it's hard to see the positives of your kids when you're so incredibly frustrated. I think that's the part that I really enjoyed. The author is very honest, which can increase relatability and hope. And it talks about the challenges of raising kids when you have a really small village. As somebody who has a kid who has no family here, that's something that really resonated for me because that is a huge challenge when you have a kid with a smaller village around you to help raise them. This book, the overall premise is that she's going into 3 different cultures and looking at different parenting practices there to share those parenting practices with the world. As part of that, there's a fair amount of romanticization and a little bit of patronization of non-Western cultures, which is frustrating. Also, the skills and the strategies that she's talking about don't exist in the cultural vacuum. They exist in the culture of that of those people, and so not everything is relatable or would be possible in the culture that the person who's reading the book is in, because the book is written focusing on skills that are somewhere else. A lot of sometimes her personal dislikes of child-centered activities and other things are presented as a more universal flaw. There's one part that talks about, and I think this is on the next slide, but there's one part that talks about consumerism in childhood and how there's just so many toys out there and so many kids end up with so many toys, and it comes across as a critique of play in general, which we all know play is great for kids, so it's a little strange there. And then there's some conjecture about the roots of flaws in Western parenting and society, which can feel not helpful and a little bit tangential. The strategies that she talks about can be really well described, and the skills complement a lot of the ones that we see in other books. More critiques for this one. There's a lot of cherry-picked examples and generalizations. Again, some of those arguments are a bit too sweeping. And the author's honesty can sometimes feel quite jarringly harsh towards her child, which takes you out of the ability to kind of understand the skills themselves that you're seeing. And then there's very minimal discussion of problematic practices that she might have seen. It's all focused on good things, which is good in a way, but also you kind of wonder, was there any part of this that was less helpful? That's Not Gather Parent. The next book is kind of, again, focus. So now we're focusing in more on what about books where there's more of a specific topic that the author's focusing on. And so The Explosive Child is focused on helping parents who have kids with really challenging behaviors. The target age for this is pretty much all the strategies work. You might have to tailor some of the language for a child who's younger, but it's really appropriate for all ages. The overall approach is enhancing attachment with empathy and collaborative problem solving. So working with your kids to find out where are these behaviors coming from, what's causing them, and how can we help. Comes in a lot of languages, comes in every format, which is really helpful. And then strengths in this book, there are a lot of broad strategies and descriptions that apply to a variety of diagnoses. So this is not a book where it's only suited for one diagnosis or a few diagnoses. It can really go for a lot of different things. It employs the ABC model, the antecedent behavior and consequence model that we really love, with some different names on top. Emphasizes collaboration and empathy for specific strategies. And then there's case studies that are referenced back throughout the book that I think, kind of like you were saying, relatable stories and personal stories makes it really helpful to be able to imagine these strategies working in every family that you're seeing, even if it's a case where the behaviors are really, really, really challenging. Sometimes the terms can be a bit confusing and hard to remember. I found myself having to go back into pages every so often and be like, what was plan B again? What was plan A? And it can be occasionally a bit dismissive of behavior plan from other cases. But something to keep in mind. More strengths, there's a guided strategy for helping parents to understand where their kids are struggling and what issues are coming up as a result of that. So not just looking at it as, oh, my kid can never finish their homework, but oh, why are they struggling to finish their homework? What's getting in the way? Also is and it's a book where like the person has their own website and their own strategy or their own questionnaires and things as well. So all of it is their personal questionnaire that's included in the book, but I think is helpful, but just something to keep in mind. Includes information about further resources where to look, and then also talks very briefly, but let's talk about strategies for sibling challenges, and then also with working with schools and teachers. And then it has some really easy scripts to use. I think one of the hard things with a lot of parenting resources is they have these beautiful scripts for how to talk to your kids and how to kind of improve your communication. And they're so long that in the moment you're just like, I can't remember any of what this said and how I was supposed to be, phrasing something. So that's the explicit child. And then the very last one I want to talk about is narrowing down onto a more specific topic. So again, looking at, folks across ranges. This one's the online world that you think you know and what you don't. The target age for this book is prior to independent screen use and prior to independent online access. And the overall approach is encouraging guided conversations around screen and social media use. So really, really huge, really important topic. And unfortunately, it's also a newer book, so it's only in English, and I only found a printed book and an ebook. I didn't see that there was an audiobook version. This book is really good at strongly highlighting the dangers of online use with specific examples and statistics. The author works with Crime Stoppers in Houston, so she has a lot of wealth of knowledge to go off of. And it also is really good at taking this gigantic topic and breaking it down into specific categories and specific skills to work on, with example conversation starters. It also discusses how screen and social media use impacts kids emotionally, which I think is one of the things that is, when we're looking at the dangers of online use, I think is one of the things that's harder to fit into it sometimes. Critiques is that it's a huge topic. It's hard to avoid being too broad. There's a bit of a missed opportunity to discuss parental modeling of online, device use and online access. And it's long enough and intense enough that I think it could use some more chapter summaries with the strategies and like a nice small, okay, let's recap this really quickly. It does directly address the question of child and teen privacy online, which I think is one of the things that when I was first thinking about like, okay, talking to kids about social media and screen time was a challenge. You want kids to feel like they have a private life, but at the same time, nothing that they put online is private. And there's some really good, memorable, specific quotes that talk about important and overarching concepts. My favorite one is, if you feel that your child cannot handle the conversations around the issues they'll face online, they are not ready for a gadgeted device that connects them to the online world. I just thought that was a really nice, like, sticks in your head, easy to remember, really gets the point across quickly. So conclusions, parenting is a monumental task. Having resources to help families help themselves and help families critically evaluate those tools helps all of us. And then future directions, I think it would be really interesting to be able to have like a journal club kind of space for parenting books, so that we can kind of get more of a chance to learn about and talk about these. And then also wondering if this is a space where maybe AI could be helpful, kind of summarize books for us, give us a chance to learn more about what is inside these pages without having to read the entire book ourselves. And then you'll have to complete one more survey for me. I'd really appreciate it. And then any questions that everyone has.
So thank you. My awkward pause as I fill this out. Thank you so much for that. You want us to fill this out right now before we ask you any questions?
Either way, it's only 2 questions. So
Okay, only 2 questions. Okay, we'll do that. Online community, fill out your survey.
Christie, I'm wondering, as you were putting this together, if there were any books, you don't have to name them, but where you're like, I wouldn't include these because they were so bad. And if you could just share, like, what would be the characteristic of something that we would steer families away from?
Yeah, I don't think I managed to read any yet that I was like, you should never ever read this in your entire life.
Yeah.
I think if I had read a book like that and a family did bring it up, then kind of like a motivational interviewing style, like, what did you get out of this book? What was helpful? And, trying to use my professional expertise to also say, these are some of the things I was particularly concerned about with this, and I'm curious what you thought about it.
So I work with a lot of parents with low literacy and low educational attainment and newcomers. And so I'm wondering if you have recommendations for how to convey some of this information while retaining like the source and the author's intent. I'm like, what recommendations you have for doing that? I'm working with those families and
Yeah, I think that's a really, really challenging one. And I think the biggest thing is finding out, like, is there a format or a language of this book that would be more helpful or accessible for them? I know for some of them, specifically for how to talk so kids will listen, I don't know how often these occur. I don't know where they are, but I know at least in the past there used to be workshops that they would host about it. So that might be one way that parents can get that information.
A lot of parents now seem to be asking about like influencers or like parents on TikTok, on Instagram, and of course this comes up with teens as well. And so any like parent influencers that.
Yeah.
Because that also, that seems to be.
Yeah, no, super popular. And I've followed some of them. I don't see their things quite as often. I think it's hard because those sources change so much. And I think a lot of times the influencers are exactly where I see a lot of the like scripts of what to say to your child or how to respond when your child asks something. It can make it feel really challenging as a parent because you're like, I can't memorize this, or I can, pick up a few things from it, but in the moment, if your brain goes blank, you can't think back to such a long script to help your kid. One of the things I really did like with the online world is it focuses a lot on kids, like why kids use social media. So tangential, but also related at the same time, focuses on why kids want to use social media and what they get out of it. And I think one of the things I don't think about as often that I want to make sure I ask about, especially after reading, is there's kids who want to be famous, who want to be influencers. And what are, ask about that and why. What are the specific things they need to worry about more than other kids might, if that's their goal?
Also, just wanted to put a plug for Rivalry. It's the same authors as Pat Faber and.
Yeah, Adele Faber
That's
and
also a
Adolescent.
for parents who have ones.
Michelle, do we have anyone on Zoom who has a question? Just want to make sure we're, okay, thank you.
Thanks everybody so much. I appreciate y'all listening.